25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the Davis is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious. Yep. How about that?
Well, it was a wild rivalry weekend, not just Saturday, but Friday night as well, as we'll get into here in a little bit. Garrett, the eyes of Texas are now on Atlanta for an SEC championship berth. Ryan Day still has a Michigan problem, and Miami still has a Mario Cristobal problem. And a lot of other chaos ensued around the country today. Guys, we are super thankful that you are joining us, finishing off your Saturday night with us as we take in a couple more games that are still going on around the country with big implications, not just for conference title races, but the college football playoff as well. Specifically in Provo, Utah, we're keeping a big eye on Houston, BYU that's ticking towards halftime to see how that's going to impact the Big 12 race. Garrett, it was a sad ending to the day for us as fans of a team that came up short in a big rivalry game, but overall, rivalry week Saturday more than delivered in my mind.
Oh, yeah, and I had a feeling that it was going to end up being a little bit lackluster. All the, upset energy kind of got spent earlier in the day, right? So by the time it got to the evening, there really wasn't a whole lot of upset energy left in any of rivalry week. So as much as you would have liked to have seen it if you're an Aggie fan, definitely wasn't anything left after the absolute insanity across the country. Not just today, but, a little bit last night as well. There's some interesting endings to some games and definitely a lot to talk about. There's going to be a fantastic finish to this season. And I'm definitely excited to see kind of who comes out on top. I do think if there's one thing you feel pretty good about saying right now, it's that there might not be an elite team anywhere in college football. There's a whole lot of good ones, and I'm excited to see which of those good teams ends up winning the whole thing this year.
Do you want to remind you guys before we jump in full blast, we are sponsored by the good friends at Home Field Apparel. You guys make sure you're using our code 3TechPod for 15% off, but also make sure that you're still getting in on the Black Friday sale. It is still going on, even though Black Friday is over. Black Friday sale on Home Field Apparel is still going on. Take 30% off their entire catalog with code BFCM24. Again, don't use our code this week. You can shop through our link on Twitter to support the show. We really appreciate it, but make sure you're using that code BFCM24. Take care of all that Christmas shopping for the college sports fans in your life at Home Field Apparel. Make sure you're following along on the socials as well at 3TechPod on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as well. Make sure you're subscribed and locked in for all of our coverage down the stretch of this college football season. Garrett, we are coming down the stretch, and rivalry weekend means that we are really close and deciding a lot of big things across the college football space. Let's start with the game in College Station, Texas. Mitch is most likely stuck in traffic somewhere on Texas Avenue or University Drive, one of those, in the heart of College Station. There's 109,000 people in the stands tonight, and I can tell you there were a whole lot more than that just walking around campus today. It was an electric atmosphere. It was everything you want for the return of a rivalry, except if you're a fan of the home team. The result, Texas comes out on top 17-7 is the final score. And Garrett, my main takeaway from this one was being really impressed with the Texas defense. I tweeted out some stats that they were part of here. Gave up just 3 yards per carry on the ground, forced 2 turnovers, a couple really crucial ones when it looked like Texas A&M had a chance to seize momentum in the first half. Another one is they were trying desperately late to try to come back into the game when it seemed like most of the hope was lost, but they really squashed it with that last fumble recovery. And Garrett, they allowed 0 offensive points. The only points that Texas A&M scored were on that big pick 6 that gave them life. That was another thing too. A&M's defense made a lot of plays to keep them in it, but the Texas defense just completely shut down everything A&M wanted to do offensively, and it really made the game seem pretty much in doubt from the time that they got up by a couple scores.
Yeah, it was a very bizarre showing from A&M where I feel like most times when I saw the offense operate through most of the field, I had no real issues with what was going on. And then once it got down to the red zone, I had lots of issues and lots of questions for what was going on. Then, you flip it over to the defense, didn't like the way the defense looked for A&M at any point in time until you got down to the red zone. And then I was like, hey, what do you know? I guess the defense found out how to play again. They forced a couple turnovers down there and, find ways to keep Texas out of the end zone. But really, at the end of the day, Trey, you're right. The Texas defense, very impressive. I mean, extremely impressive against, yes, a hobbled A&M run game, right? They've been down a couple of starters, and Ruben Owens kind of made a reappearance from, not playing at all this season, ran the ball 3 times for 10 yards. But Amari Daniels, 13 carries, 21 yards, and Marcel Reed trying to get something going, 14 carries, 60. Really just not a lot of success for the Aggies there. And for a team that wants to run the football and keep their offense balanced, didn't have it tonight. And when you rely on Marcel Reed to be the pocket passer, definitely had some good moments, but just was not a complete effort from Marcel Reed in the passing game. And so Texas defense had a tough task, but ultimately rose up to the occasion. I found myself not all that impressed with the Texas offense outside of the fact that they could just kind of line it up, run the ball with whatever they wanted to, right? They successfully over and over again were able to just kind of line up and go get 8 yards. It seemed like every time they wanted to, the first and 10, hand the ball off, you're looking at second 2. It was, not necessarily an impressive showing. I was more, disappointed in A&M's defense than I was impressed with what Texas was doing on offense. But at the end of the day, you do what works. Quinn had some up and down moments, so they didn't make him win the game. They put it on Trey Wisner, and Trey Wisner, 33 carries for 186 yards, outruns the entire A&M team by over 80 yards. Fantastic effort from him. Really just the Herculean effort there from Trey. And, just pretty much the whole story there. Low scoring affair, but, overall a good performance from the Longhorns. And whether it was their best game or not, they get to go play Atlanta and they get to go play for an SEC championship game. And, it hasn't always been the prettiest for the Longhorns getting here, but winning is a skill, and it's a skill that they have.
The offensive performance definitely could have been a lot. It could have looked a lot more lopsided, right? A&M easily could have been shut out in this one if a tip pass doesn't go the other way for 6 late in the third quarter. You punch that one in, it's 24-0. Quinn fumbles deep in A&M territory as well to give A&M life. You punch that one in, it's all of a sudden 31-0, and you're talking about just an absolute laugher in College Station. But yeah, I mean, Quinn Ewers battled. He's obviously playing a little hurt. His scrambles that kept drives alive were crucial in big spots to kind of keep that momentum going offensively. It was a gritty performance from the Texas offense in a really tough environment on the road. They played disciplined football, I thought, and you're absolutely right. The running game is what really wore on that Texas A&M defense as the game kept going. Offensive line looked really good against a talented defensive front. I'm really interested to see how they matured over the course of the season, how they match up in the SEC championship game next week against Georgia. Obviously for A&M, it's a very disappointing finish to the regular season. Texas looks like a championship caliber team. Obviously it's huge to get to the SEC championship in year 1 in the league. That's a massive success for Steve Sarkisian and company. But year 1 in Mike Elko, November was a complete flop. You and I and Mitch sat here on October 26th, dreaming of what could be for this Texas A&M team after a big win over LSU at home. They go 1-3 in November, with the one win being a bye game against New Mexico State, and just 3 losses where, quite frankly, they weren't ready to play from the word go in any of them. They fall behind 14-0 against South Carolina. They fall behind 21-0 against Auburn and 17-0 against their rival Texas Longhorns. Garrett, you kind of talked me off the ledge a little bit, but a lot of this, we know that Mike Elko inherited a very difficult situation in the aftermath of Jimbo Fisher. It looked like he looked like a world beater at the end of October. He looked like, and he even said it in his post-game press conference after LSU, this is a program that's not gimmicky. This is a program that if you want to come here and be a great football player, you need to come to Texas A&M. November did not look that way, and it's going to leave a lot to be desired. A lot of questions need to be answered, starting maybe with Mike Elko looking in the mirror and thinking about his strategy and his mindset on these fourth down calls, because two big moments when you're missing your multiple starters on the offensive line, you're missing your power back, the guy that made your offense go, and Le'Veon Moss, all down due to injuries. You go for it on 4th and short early in the game on the first possession, you come up short. You go for it when you're down 2 scores, 10 points. You need a field goal on 4th down. You go for the touchdown, and you come up short again. And the results is, instead of it being potentially a 17-13 game with you getting the ball back, it's 17-7 when you get the ball back with 1:40 left and no timeouts, and you're all but done.
Yeah, let's go a little bit retrospective on this one. I think if you're A&M fans right now, there's going to be a lot of people that want to jump a lot of different directions, right? And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to blame Mike Elko for his play, his decisions down the line. There's going to be a lot of people that want to blame Colin Klein for his play calling and some of the, I think, rightfully criticized poor decisions in those short, yardage situations. There's going to be a lot of people that want to blame Marcel for not, finding guys open, which, by the way, tell me you don't know football, a couple of times. There's, I think, one shot that he really missed. The one that came open on that completion to the tight end only came open because the corner bailed on his coverage to go get the guy. So don't do that, guys. There are a lot of really poor takes during the game from my Aggie friends and on Twitter and all that. So, don't do that. There's lots of blame to go around, or the receivers not getting separation. That was one we heard throughout the season. Is it, the play calling? Is it the quarterback decision-making? Is it the limitations on the defensive side? Is it the run game? There's lots of different things you can blame right now. At the end of the day, you have to realize, number one, you go 8-4. That's better than Jimbo done for a couple of years. And as much as the joke is 8-4 for A&M, that hadn't been the standard you had met for a couple of years. So welcome back to at least C level at the very least. And I don't think that you can discredit what this team has done this year. It's a lot of injuries down the stretch, and I think it's a lot of just personnel issues, right? It's still year one. Everyone needs to take a big deep breath in and a big deep breath out. In year one, you played a Texas team in year 4 under Sark, year 3 or 4 under Sark?
Year 4. Yeah.
A team that just made the playoff last year and is going to make the playoff this year and might just win the conference this year. You played them to 10 points. You need to feel okay about that if you're an Aggie fan. There is a lot to be disappointed about tonight. There are a lot of ways that you beat yourself. There's a lot of ways that you shot yourself in the foot. Everyone needs to take a big step off the ledge. This is not the same thing as what we just finished with Jimbo. Everyone needs to take a big step back from the ledge. You're not going to find me on the cliff jumping group right now, and that might make a lot of my Aggie fans, upset at me for that, but you're just not going to find me doing that.
For me, I don't want to spend, 30 minutes hashing this out, but I got to see a big step forward next year, and I got to see some accountability from Mike Elko, because it wasn't just the Texas game. It was the South Carolina game that you went for it on 4th down in your own territory and that made that game kind of get away from you early. It was, again, like I said earlier, not having your team ready to go with playoff hopes on the line at Auburn and falling down 21-0. There's a lot of cultural issues at Texas A&M that he's having to root through. I'll be the first one to tell you that he inherited an absolute mess when Jimbo Fisher was ousted and he took over. What he did in the portal was borderline miraculous to get in the guys that he was able to get in there. He dealt with a lot of injuries. He had an uphill battle this year, but we got to see some steps forward next year to have optimism going forward for me. And really, quite frankly, what you saw tonight on the field was just evidence of how far the gap is between your hated rivals in Austin and what you currently have in College Station. It's not insurmountable, but it's certainly a sizable gap right now and something that you're going to have to make up ground on year over year. It's not going to be changed overnight.
And if you thought that it was going to change overnight, I think that you're just a little bit naive. Okay, we're talking about a championship program.
A lot of Aggies did, though. A lot of Aggies thought, and a lot of national media thought that this was going to be a moment where Texas was exposed, and it was quite the opposite.
Look, to some degree, Texas was kind of exposed. The offense had some pretty big issues. They ran the ball well. And outside of that, you can't tell me that 17 points is impressive. Like, there were some issues on the Texas side. Texas didn't come away from this game showing me that they were like a world beater team. They showed me that they're good and they know how to win and they know what works, and Sark knows what works. And if Sark is working with, again, talk about the running back issues on A&M side, Trey Wisner was not supposed to be your starting running back going into the year if you're the Texas Longhorns. But he made his running back issues into a running back strength. Look, and a lot of my Aggie fans will probably, not like me for this one, and I'm going to call it like I see it. A lot of Aggie fans need to take a big step back and realize that life ain't just Johnny Manziel the whole time, okay? You can't just expect permanent success, period, all the time, okay? There's building programs. You actually have to build up a program. You actually have to sometimes start over. And when you had an issue like what you had with Jimbo, and you have an issue with, all of the cultural problems, and the guy is going 60 miles per hour in a parking garage, like, that's not just a guy, that's a cultural thing. And when you have that culture and you have a new guy walk in the building, that doesn't just change immediately, right? He kicked some people out of the program, which is good. He got some guys to show up. That's good. He addressed some positions of need. That's good. He didn't do a perfect job. And also, no coach has a 100% hit rate in the portal. So there were some guys that he probably tried to hit on that weren't hits, and that's fine. He'll go back to the portal. He'll need to go talk back with his staff and make sure that they learned the lessons they need to learn from this, year. And there should be improvements next year. And you should also probably think about the fact that you're going to probably all offseason tailor your offense towards your starting quarterback, Marcel Reed, not the way that they did all offseason, tailoring it to a guy like Connor Wigman who disappeared on you for, you get hurt, you come back, whatever it is. He wasn't the same guy, and he just wasn't there for the system. Guys, you got to take a big step back from the ledge. Okay, you got to take a big step back. You got to be patient. 8-4, go win a bowl game for the first time since 2020. And you can go into the offseason, hold your head up a little bit high, ready to go.
Well, like I said, Texas clinched a spot in the the SEC championship game.
Old habits die hard.
Old habits die hard, and they let everyone hear it with the SEC chants at the end.
Which I don't really understand. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really get it.
I mean, I get it. You got told all year that you're not gonna make it through an SEC schedule, and then you're in the championship and you won. I get it. I thought it was.
They still kind of didn't, but no, that's look. They got a really easy schedule. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, but I mean, they won all the games
in front of you, Texas. I got to give you credit for it.
Yeah. They will face Georgia in that SEC championship game, who survived in a wild one on Friday night. On Black Friday night, it was Georgia 44, Georgia Tech 42 in 8 overtimes. Garrett, officially 8 overtimes. I know it was really 2 overtimes and then a bunch of 2-point conversions, but 8 overtime periods were played. Georgia comes out on top. A lot of discussion about this game. Obviously, Georgia Tech goes up 17-0 at halftime. They are dominating the game. There's a lot of controversy about the officiating in multiple instances in this game that I'm sure we'll get into, but Georgia found a way to win this game when the odds were completely stacked against them. They could have packed it in. They could have said, you know what, we're going to play for the SEC championship next week. It doesn't really matter. But they somehow found a way to win a rivalry game. Officiating aside, I thought it was impressive for them to dig deep and come back.
Well, and you do have to put the officiating aside because the officiating affected this game a lot.
Officiating's an epidemic. We know this
in college football at this point. Again, an SEC crew, which I didn't think was the case for, out of conference games. I thought that typically it was the road team that brought the crew. But another SEC crew that does a poor job. Look, I know that it's become popular over the recent weeks to complain about the refs, but it was pretty terrible. It was pretty garbage. Lots to be made of that missing hold on that final score. That's obviously a big one, but there were plays up and down the field. Look, a lot can be made of it. Ultimately, I do think Georgia has some deficiencies as a team. They only ran for 108 yards in this game, but you got to give them credit. Again, they win games. I do think this is the first year. And I'm going to maybe open this up to the bigger discussion, but this is the first year I think the broader college football public has a point. The SEC is massively overrated this year. I don't think Texas or Georgia stand up next to some of the teams across this country that are going to be in some of those championship games. I just don't think that they can realistically say that they're as complete of a team right now. That one of them might end up winning, right? It could be Georgia or Texas winning the whole thing. It wouldn't shock me, but I think right now Oregon has a much better case. There's teams like even a Penn State that's heading to all of a sudden the Big Ten championship game that could have a better case. They're a more complete team right now. I'm not super impressed with either of these teams. Neither of these teams are juggernauts or world beaters. There's a lot of issues with both of these teams in terms of what they're going to put out there at the high levels. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just hot takes McGee over here. I think the SEC is a little overrated this year. I don't think Georgia is all that good. Georgia Tech gave them everything they wanted and more. Haynes King outdueled Carson Beck, in the air. Haynes King was a leading rusher in this game. Haynes King is a freaking gladiator. He wanted it. He gave everything he possibly could. I don't know if they wheeled his corpse out of that stadium afterwards or like how he ended up going home, but there wasn't a whole lot left in the tank for him. And he deserved every piece of it. If Georgia Tech didn't get cute on the goal line for those 2-point conversions, I think they probably find a way to win that game.
That Georgia Tech had a lot of chances to win the game. Want to jump back to your point about Georgia and Texas not really being elite. I think that that's a college football wide problem. I think that in all years past, we could point to at least one, sometimes even 2 or 3 teams that you looked at and they just didn't really have a fatal flaw. And I don't think that the top end of college football, maybe the top 5, has a fatal flaw. I was really impressed with Texas defense tonight. Like I already said, I think that's a championship caliber defense. I don't know that Texas or Georgia or Oregon or Ohio State, or you fill in the blank. We'll talk about Ohio State in a second. They don't have a fatal flaw, but they have flaws. They all have flaws. Every single team that's going to be in this 12-team field has flaws that could get you beat on a given week. And I think that's what's going to be great about having this expanded field this year with the talent spread out like it is, with the transfer portal and NIL having the impact that it has and the parity that we've seen in college football this year. No one has a fatal flaw. Some teams do, but everyone has flaws that can be exploited in a single game basis in a single elimination tournament with a bad matchup. A lot of people would say that Georgia's fatal flaw potentially is Carson Beck. He put the team on his back this Georgia Tech game, Garrett. You mentioned they could not run the ball. That's been a big problem for the Georgia
Georgia's
offense.
fatal flaw. They can't run the ball for anything.
That might be a fatal flaw, but
they can't run the ball for anything, man.
That's certainly going to be a flaw that certain teams can exploit, but maybe they get into a matchup with a team that doesn't have as good of a run defense, right?
Sure.
And they can exploit that themselves. We'll see. Texas run defense looked amazing tonight against Texas A&M, a really good rushing team. They're going to get another shot at Georgia next week. But Carson Beck, when the Yellow Jackets knew that they could not run the ball, 297 yards through the air on 28 of 43 passing for 5 touchdowns. And the big key, Garrett, no interceptions. He did not have an interception.
That's the big one.
He did have a fumble, but it was recovered by the offense. So no turnovers for Carson Beck. Huge key, no matter who they play in the college football playoff and next week against Texas in the SEC championship. He took care of the football, and that allowed Georgia to have a chance to come back in this one.
And there were real moments down the stretch of that game where Carson Beck was locked in, man. He was just effortless, rolling out,
despite
making
drops,
plays.
And despite his
own
receiving core's best effort.
Oh my
gosh,
his receiving core was trying to throw the game. Who's the guy who dropped it in the back of the end zone on the 2-pointer? Was that Arian Smith? I can't remember who that was, but
I think it was
somebody in the back of the end zone dropped one right in his hands. And I was like, if I'm Carson Beck, I'm throwing stuff, not the football anymore. I mean, like, I'm throwing my helmet at this guy. I'm doing anything I can to be like, catch the ball. Like, it is just absurd with that guy. But I mean, look, like, it's a tough game sometimes, I guess. And, it's not always easy to catch a ball right in your hands. No, I don't know. I just don't know that either of these teams in the SEC are complete enough to compete against the top teams in, like, the Big Ten, for example. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see an SEC team make the Final Four. Like, there's some good teams out there that are playing good football right now. And if you let a couple of them in through championship games, it wouldn't shock me just based on seeding or how the matchups go, or, if any of them have to travel, it just wouldn't shock me if we don't see one of these teams in the Final Four.
It would probably shock me at this point because I think Texas is playing like a Final Four team right now, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And
On the
Georgia, I
defensive
think
side, yes.
Georgia at their ceiling is a national championship caliber team. And I think could find a way, depending on matchups. We'll talk about who's in and who's out in just a second, but depending on matchups, I think that they're going to be in a really good spot.
Yeah.
Even if they have to go on the road in the first round, which is looking likely. But for now, they'll get ready for a matchup with Texas next week. That one's going to be Saturday afternoon on ABC. Really excited to see Texas versus Georgia round 2. Let's go over to the Big Ten, Garrett, because we were all penciling in Oregon, Ohio State next week. And little did we know that Ryan Day still has a Michigan problem. You can play that fight song, Hail to the Victors. 13-10.
Hail to the Victors.
13-10 victors.
Joe, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, Joe.
So I do need to relay a message from Joe.
Okay.
It was a roller coaster of emotions for our friend, obviously. Good friend of the
seriously.
show. Massive Ohio State fan. Obviously a big roller coaster of emotions today. He would like to announce his formal retirement from the super fan episodes. He says that he's not going to be going forward. So Teddy is in the chat right now. $20 million. We're both clicking at the same time. $20 million, and they still can't beat us. Joe does not have a comeback for that.
Oh,
and he
man.
will
If
not
you
be
didn't
returning.
see the super fan showdown, look, this isn't me trying to go back or gloat or whatever. Nobody really thought Michigan was going to win this game in the super
No
fan
one
showdown.
did. No.
I think Teddy was mostly picking them just to kind of go for it. Look, when Teddy made the case for, how are we going to find a way to beat these? The big game was, or the big point was, you got to find a way for your defensive line to beat the offensive line. There are a lot of mismatches up there, and that's exactly what happened. D-line got after him all game and really caused a lot of problems, especially in the red zone and on the plus side of the field. And it was just put your hard hat on, go out there, muddy it up, go to work. And nothing screams put your hard hat on more than that last drive where they kicked that field goal. I'm putting it back up here. Michigan put their hard hats on today. Okay, they put those hard hats on. They found a way to go to work. They did it. And you said, some of these teams don't have a fatal flaw. Ohio State's fatal flaw is Michigan. Fortunately, Michigan won't be
in the bracket, though.
So they will not be able to lose to Michigan in the playoff, which is extremely good news if you're Ryan Day and co. But wow, like of all the fan bases that are going to feel bad tonight after rivalry games, obviously A&M fan base, lots of questions. There is no fan base that is further in hell right now than Ohio State's fan base, wondering if they're ever going to find a way to beat Michigan. It's again, I will continue to say this. It has been before the COVID era since the last time they beat them. That was 2019. It has been so long since Ohio State has beaten Michigan. I think the longest streak since like the late 80s. If Ryan Day's out there somewhere, somehow listening to this, I'd like to know where Ryan Day is right now. You got to find a way to get it done. There's no possible way that you can justify not beating Michigan this many times in a row. What are you supposed to do at this point, right? You've exhausted all efforts. You've hit the different quarterbacks. It clearly wasn't Kyle McCord's fault. It isn't because you don't have receivers. You've got receivers. I don't know. They got running backs this year. They've had the best defense in the country this year. What else are you supposed to do? Can't be Michigan.
1,827 days since Ohio State has beaten Michigan. For those keeping track at home,
you got to have the
Ryan. Say it again.
It's a whole lot of days.
It's a lot of days. Got to have the Ryan Day conversation because you know the stats by now if you follow college football. 47-1 against teams not named Michigan. Now 1-4 against teams named Michigan. I have to feel like there's a lot of pressure. And obviously, again, talking to my source on the pulse of the Ohio State fandom is our friend Joe that comes on the show and does the Superfan episodes. I asked him, do you think that he has to win the national championship to save his job? And Joe said unequivocally yes. And obviously, Joe is not Ross Bjork. He is not the decision maker, but I have to feel like that's kind of the sentiment of the fan base right now. He is on thin ice, and he kind of needs to deliver in this playoff and probably win the national championship with this roster that fan base delivered for him to be able to save his job. And that's wild to say with the record that he has, but that's just how much this game means and how inexcusable this loss was today.
It is as desperate an Ohio State team as you're going to see. Whether that turns into a miraculous playoff run or whether that turns into stupid decisions, stupid mistakes, and a quick exit, that's still to be seen, right? We don't know. A lot of that's probably going to be dependent on matchups and seeding and all that, but yeah, I don't know that I'd want to play Ohio State right now because I think they're going to be about as pissed off as anybody in this playoff field. But man, even at the end of all this, let's say they host the national champion, they hoist that national championship trophy over their head, that large golden column or whatever it is, and they go, all right, here we go, we finally won the whole thing. There's still going to be a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth. Like, they're going to love it. You're going to love a national championship. Don't get me wrong. But Michigan has one too last year, and they've got scoreboard. It's just going to feel a little gross. It's going to feel a little bad, and there's still going to be a little bit of restlessness going into next year. Yeah, they got to win the whole dang thing, but yeah, it's tough right now for Ohio State fans. And the problem is you got a great coach. Who do you go to from here?
That's a great question.
If you're Ross Bjork, the answer is Mark Stoops, but it's I don't think that Mark Stoops is the answer Ohio State fans want to hear, obviously.
Mark Stoops has removed his name from consideration. Gosh, that was a year ago around tonight that we were going through that. Yeah, so one more stat from this game, 4.27 yards per play for Ohio State. That's obviously a lack of explosivity. That is the lowest yards per play total that they've been held to in any regular season game since 2018.
And
so it's been a long time.
Handed Ryan Day the controller?
Maybe.
I don't know if you saw that came back up, the little thing that they did to show that it's his turn, where he's like, "Oh, your turn," whatever, and then he handed it to him. Today, somebody matched that up with a clip of like a GTA school bus going off a cliff, and it hit pretty good. If you want to go follow me on Twitter, I retweeted it. It made me laugh.
Not doing a lot to dispel the born on third base and thinks he has a triple allegations.
Well, combined with Ohio State, thrown out at second.
Yeah, I mean, he'd find a way. It seems like if Michigan is the team that's pitching and catching, he would find a way. It seems like at this point, going to be really interesting to see. And I feel that, Teddy. I feel like for you as a Michigan fan, that had to feel super sweet.
It's literally the meme. Who'd have thought? Huh? Not me.
Who's got it better than us, right? Jim Harbaugh is still the ghosts of Jim Harbaugh are still haunting that Ohio State program. Combined with that Ohio State loss and Penn State's win over Maryland today, it will be Maryland versus, it will not be Maryland. It will be Penn State versus
Penn
Oregon.
State beating Maryland has thrust the Terrapins into the Big Ten title game.
The Big Ten actually changed the rules like they did a few years ago in the COVID year to try to get an extra team.
Minnesota, Maryland.
Yeah, and so it's going to be Maryland. They actually drew straws, and Maryland gets a shot.
Yeah.
No, it will be Penn State versus Oregon in Indianapolis next week. Going to be interesting. I think that's a defense that I think could give Oregon some trouble. We'll preview that one obviously in full later this week, but on paper, I'm at least intrigued to see a new matchup in that one.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. I was a little disappointed with the rematch idea, right? Like there was a lot of us who were, there's on one hand, you're excited, right? You get to go see it again. It was a good game the first time, but I don't like seeing rematches, and it's kind of the problem with these new formats, right? In the conference championship games. I don't like all the rematches. So getting to see Penn State get a crack at another top team, right? Like, they didn't take care of business when they went and played Ohio State. So like, obviously that's a glaring problem for them, but they took care of the rest of their schedule. They go get a chance to, go and take care of Oregon. Hopefully they can find their way through it. It's a big moment for the program. It's a big moment for James Franklin finding a way if you can go hoist a Big Ten championship, who cares about the rest of the season? You just secured some job security. You can go win your conference and maybe turn that into some recruiting and transfer portal success. That's a heck of a moment for this Penn State program. Obviously, I think Oregon probably wins this game right now. I'm going to wait, save my reserve my take for the midweek show. But yeah, big moment for Penn State, and I'm excited that we get a different game.
Penn State won their game 44-7 over Maryland. It was never really in doubt. Oregon, for their part, they had already clinched a spot in the championship game, but they expelled some demons that Ohio State could not expel by knocking off Washington. I mean, yeah, Dan Lanning had a Washington problem in his first couple of years at Oregon, 0-3 in 2 years, knocks them off 49-21.
I'm willing to say it might have been a Kalen DeBoer problem.
Might have been a Kalen DeBoer
or a Michael Penix problem. I don't know.
Well, either way, they knock off the Huskies. It didn't matter if coaching change and quarterback change did not matter for Ryan Day. So they expelled their demons in a way that Ohio State couldn't. So interested to see that one. Let's go over to the ACC because this one was pretty cut and dry. Two contenders playing for one spot. SMU had already locked up a spot in the championship game. They went ahead and just took care of business against Cal today, 38-6. Might as well send the home fans out on a happy note. They set themselves up nicely for a playoff spot, even if they lose next week, though.
I want to say a lot of people doubted that game because Cal had done a really good job, like covering spreads, keeping games close. I think I saw on game day they said like all of their losses this year had been by a combined 17 or something like that. Yep. So
5 losses by a combined 17.
To beat them by 32, I think is a big accomplishment. And SMU is a team that I would not want to see on the field right now if I was somebody else. SMU looks as complete as any team in the country right now.
They are going to be really interesting to see what the committee does with them, especially if I'm bearing the lead here. Let's get into the ACC championship matchup. Miami had a very simple mission as they went up to Syracuse in upstate New York. Win and you're in. Win, you get a shot at a playoff. Lose, you're out of the ACC championship and likely out of the college football playoff, barring something really, really crazy happening. Should we bet on Mario Cristobal in must-win situations, Garrett?
Oh, boy. You're tempted to. You're really tempted to.
He has all the talent. He has a talent advantage. He has one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
It's huge. Great quarterback.
So surely they went up to Syracuse and took care of business.
Well, and
What if I told you they got out to a 21-0 lead?
That would be huge. Well, and I was told reliably that Kyle McCord was a problem for Ohio State. So surely Kyle McCord, the hapless Kyle McCord, the problem with Ohio State Kyle McCord, surely he didn't beat Miami.
He did.
Say it ain't so.
42-38. And what if I told you there was a really questionable coaching decision at the end of this game, Garrett? Would you be surprised by that?
Not even a little bit. I can't keep it up. I'm sorry. That's just so bad.
Mario Cristobal elected to kick a 27-yard field goal when he was down by 7 with 3:42 to go. And his defense hadn't stopped anybody since the first quarter. So that was a choice. It did not work out. I don't think they got the ball back. Is that correct? I'm looking it up right now.
They were. No, I don't know if they did or not.
They did not. Yeah, they gave the ball back to Syracuse, and Syracuse ran out the clock.
Well, and did you see part of how they ran out the clock was on 3rd and 4? There's just a blatant jump off sides from Miami that extended the drive, and I think that probably iced. I can't remember if that was the one that iced it or if it was the next set of downs, but it was one of the last ones. Good gosh. This Miami team, what a meltdown. What an absolute meltdown from the Hurricanes. I don't even know what to say. I mean, you let Kyle McCord go for 380 on you. Cover your head in shame on your way back to the bus. Like, don't even talk to me, Miami. What are you doing?
You got to ask a lot of questions about the state of that program. I tweeted this out right after the game. They've played in the ACC now 21 seasons, and they've played in one conference championship game, which they lost to Clemson in 2017. This is a proud program, Garrett. This is one that has fallen off quite a bit thought they had gotten back up this year behind a huge transfer portal class and a nice recruiting class. But it seems like yet again, they just don't have the guy at the head coaching position to pull them up off the mat and bring them back to prominence. It's really maddening if you're a Miami fan that went through the 80s and 90s and saw what this program can be and just how inept they've fallen to.
Well, and Trey, we said it at the beginning of the season. If not now for Miami, win. Like, even with Florida State in front of you, even with a good Clemson team, even with SMU coming in, maybe doing some stuff, we said if not now, win. You had everything you wanted. You got one of the best transfer quarterbacks. You got one of the best transfer running backs. You nailed your transfers on the defensive side as well. Like, what else could you possibly want for Cristobal? Like, I don't understand what else you could use at this point. I am absolutely at a loss for words for Miami. But I do want to go ahead and talk about the victor for a second. Syracuse 9-3 this year.
Quietly,
I'm willing to say that Syracuse might be good.
Syracuse is a good little team, man. Their losses.
I'd also like to ask Ohio State fans: would you rather have had Kyle McCord today?
Well, I honestly don't know that Kyle McCord could have done much better today. Those problems, I think, were so deeply rooted in that offense.
He threw for 380 and 3 touchdowns today for the Orange.
He was playing the Miami defense, so I don't think.
Right?
Yeah. Listen, back to Syracuse though. They somehow flubbed against Stanford at home very early in the year. They are an overtime loss against Stanford, away from being a 10-win team with Kyle McCord.
And
I think that's one of
in the conversation for the playoff. I mean,
yeah, they'd be in the conversation for the ACC championship if that flipped. They'd still have 2 conference losses, but they'd be really close, and they would have been playing some really meaningful games and not just playing spoiler down the stretch.
Yeah.
But great season for Syracuse, great bounce back season for Kyle McCord. Just a really fun story. And for Miami, just a depressing one. Clemson, for their right, played South Carolina, lost 17-14 on an epic Lenore Sellers scramble to seal the game with 1 minute left. 3rd and 16, he takes off for a 20-yard touchdown. As he's done so often this year, he just makes defenses forget how to tackle because he's a large man with a head of steam, and it's really scary. But even with the loss in the Palmetto Bowl, that stings. There's still a shot at the college football playoff for Clemson because they, by virtue of Miami losing, will be in the ACC championship in Charlotte next week against SMU. The winner is in. The loser, if it's SMU, is going to be really squarely on the bubble, and it really could go either way.
I think the ACC today went from being a borderline 3 bid to a 1 bid league. I don't know if there's a way that they can get another team in. Gosh, man. I mean, because the problem is, look, if you have, I think their best situation is if Clemson wins the championship game and finds their way in on an auto bid. But even then, that's still a 3-loss champ on an auto bid where their best win is Pitt. Like, that's their best win this year. Meanwhile, SMU, I think at this point has done enough to probably warrant an at-large bid. I would put them in with an at-large bid, even if they do go, I guess, 11-2 with a loss here to Clemson in the title game. Trey, I want to emphasize this, though. Lenore Sellers is still a freshman.
Yes, he is.
Lenore Sellers is going to be a problem for the SEC. Right now, South Carolina with Lenore Sellers is good enough next year to compete to win the SEC. Lenore Sellers has all of the Cam Newton all over him. He's just impossible to tackle. He's athletic. He's quick. And if he starts to develop that arm, I know he didn't really use it that much today. It, throws 21 passes, completes it for 164 yards. Didn't really do a bunch with the arm today. But he had shown some flashes down the stretch. I'm thinking about that Missouri game especially, that he could throw the football a little bit. If he can find a way to throw the football, watch out. This dude is a certified problem, and he's going to cause issues in the SEC for the next couple of years.
I think South Carolina is going to be a really trendy pick to win the SEC next year in the preseason. I think we're going to be talking
Combine him with Stewart on the defensive side? Jeez, man.
You're going to flip their schedule, right? So everybody in the SEC is flipping their schedule. So they'll play road games at A&M and LSU. That's going to be tricky.
Yeah.
But two teams, a team that they should have beat at home and a team that they won pretty convincingly against at home this year. So they're going to be a really trendy pick to make it to Atlanta at the very least and probably make the college football playoff next year.
I'm going to tell you what, if I'm Shane Beamer, I am taking that man's phone because I'm not going to let anybody call him and say, do you want $20 million for I know that that's absurd, but in today's NIL scape, would Ohio State do it? Oh, yeah. Ohio State paid this kid to come play football. So, like, I'm not letting this kid talk to anybody. I'm like, nope, what do you want? How much do you want? What kind of cars would you like? When would you like to use, my pool? I'm giving this man access to my home. Like, this guy can do whatever he wants as far as I'm concerned. You keep Lenora Sellers on your campus if you're Shane Beamer and the rest of those guys over at South Carolina. This dude's legit. They're going to crush the transfer portal. I just have a feeling about it. They're going to get guys that want to come play with him. South Carolina is going to be fun to watch play football the next couple of years.
That they are. Great turnaround story for Shane Beamer.
Oh, yeah.
Really interested in that Clemson SMU game next week. I don't think
real quick on the Shane Beamer, we talked about him as a possibility for the hot seat. Not that he was on the hot seat in the offseason, but we said if he doesn't turn it around, he might be. Can we just shut the door on that one?
Oh, of course. We looked at their schedule and just said that they are going to struggle to make a bowl, and we really weren't sold on Lenora Sellers in the preseason, and rightfully so, I think. And early on, it seemed like he started really slow, but he's come on so strong down the stretch. How do we feel about South Carolina's at-large chances as we sit here on Saturday night? I think there's just so many teams for them to jump, and Mitch and I were talking about this morning. I feel like they're going to have an Ole Miss problem because Ole Miss obviously crapped the bed against Florida last week. They win the Egg Bowl this week. It's going to be really hard, I think. You're going to have to square some circles to put South Carolina in over not just one in Ole Miss, but two teams that have identical records as them that beat them head-to-head. I think they're just going to be the odd man out in that scenario, and the committee might just say, hey, we're going to just keep all three of them out and go with someone else, like an SMU if they lose the conference championship game.
No, I think you're 100% right. I think, because you also have the opportunity that Georgia could lose, and if Georgia loses next week, then they're going to find a way to keep them in because you're not going to leave a Georgia out. That's like 10-3, right? There's just
Joe Test made it very clear that Georgia is locked up.
Oh, don't worry. Joe Test told you they're in.
And that the seniors never lost a home game.
They sure did not, man. And if you didn't know, watch the last hour and a half of that game. Joe Test will make sure you know.
I get that you have much time to fill.
Much
time to fill in an 8 overtime game. So much time to fill, but we gotta vary the conversation just a little bit.
Dude, I normally love Joe Tess. That was pretty rough.
Joe Tess is great 90% of the time. If your team is winning, Joe Tess is amazing. When Joe Tess is really bad is when your team is losing and he's calling your game. And
apparently anything past 4 overtimes.
Just in general, he has the tendency to get stuck on certain things. And he feels like he needs to repeat them about 50 times. This game, it was the fact that Georgia's locked in and the seniors have never lost a game. It's been commenting on guys in the stands that are, getting dumped by their girlfriends or whatever, if it's a Florida fan. It's been quite a few different things over the years, but that's where Joe Tess.
He's no Gus who's out there having a spiritual experience for an interception on the goal. I don't know if you ever went back and heard that call. I know y'all were out tailgating. The call for that pick in the Michigan-Ohio State game, that was
the gut where his voice cracked. That was amazing. Yeah, he was having a spiritual experience. Yeah,
he's falling out of his chair.
Yeah, we actually did have the sound on at the tailgate for that.
That was remarkable.
Great. Garrett, let's move on to, I guess let's talk Big 12 real quick because we still have a lot to be decided. As we're talking right now, BYU is up on Houston 21-10. Houston did just recover a muffed punt, and they're driving in BYU territory. So it's an interesting situation because this game, obviously, BYU has been eliminated. Houston has long been eliminated for the Big 12 championship. But with a win for BYU, Iowa State, by virtue of their win in Farmageddon, will get into the Big 12 championship. But if Houston can pull off this upset, this comeback win, then Colorado actually gets in and will play Arizona State. Arizona State dominated the Territorial Cup today, Garrett. We thought that might be a closer one than what it turned out to be, but it was 49-7. Absolute laugher. Arizona State was locked in and focused and just embarrassed Arizona on their home field. Iowa State did their part to try to lock up their bid. 8-point win over Kansas State in the Farmageddon game. I obviously was pretty locked in on A&M Texas for this one, but just looking over the stats, really impressed by Iowa State holding Kansas State to 144 yards rushing. That was my main concern for the Cyclones and why I picked the Wildcats outright. They've really struggled against run-dominated teams, but they stepped up tonight in a big way with conference championship and playoff hopes on the line.
Yeah, well, Kansas State got theirs to some degree, but being able to make the big plays, being able to limit the damage was huge. Avery Johnson kind of surprised me with his efficiency through the air. I say efficiency, I would say more maybe success. They were certainly successful at times through the air. I wouldn't necessarily say efficient, though. It's 12 for 28. That's not a fantastic game, but 220 and then 3 touchdowns, that helps your team win. But yeah, it's a huge moment for Iowa State. The offense, obviously, running the football, very good. Passing a little bit left to be desired. They only throw for 137, but yeah, definitely a good performance from Iowa State. And the big thing, this is their first 10-win season.
Ever.
That remarkable. A lot of those memes are going to go off to die. So, everyone who's using those the last week or so, see you later with those. Yeah, big for them. And also just want to shout out once again, Arizona State dominating. Arizona State's going to be a really dangerous team when it comes time for the playoff because, gosh, they can run the ball. Cam Scadaboo is a fantastic running back, 21 carries, 177. Spelled by Kyson Brown, 8 carries, 100 yards, nothing to sneeze at. And then just in case you're wondering, is this just like a one-dimensional team? Sam Leavitt figured something out. Early in the season, a little bit left to be desired, not fantastic. Today, 17 for 22, 291, 3 touchdowns. Nice little performance for him. Yeah, complete domination up and down. They had 2 players, Arizona State did, who outran the entire Arizona team. Yeah, it's not a good day for Arizona. That program has absolutely cratered. Meanwhile, Arizona State, they're on the way up. It's going to be fun. I think they're going to dominate whoever they play next week. I think they're going to make a little bit of a run. That Arizona State's kind of one of those teams. Why I was saying earlier, it wouldn't shock me if an SEC team doesn't make the Final Four. Arizona State is going to be somebody's nightmare in the first round if they don't get the bye.
If you struggle to stop the run, is not a team you want to play. And you're absolutely right to point out Sam Leavitt. His development has been something to behold. Just shout out to that staff for what they've been able to do because they were a run-only team at the start of this year. We were talking about them from week 1 when they won a nice game, we thought, against a Wyoming team that we thought would be pretty plucky this year. And then they go on the road to beat Texas State. They had some nice wins, beat Mississippi State at home, I think, and had some really nice wins early, but it was all on the back of Cam Scadaboo. For Sam Leavitt to develop and be a competent passing threat and potentially the top quarterback in the Big 12 behind Shadur Sanders this year, I did not have that on my bingo card, and it's a really huge development for the Sun Devils and a really fun one to follow. You're absolutely right. They're going to be a problem in the playoff. If you can't stop the run, you will not want to draw the Sun Devils in your first-round matchup or in any matchup.
Sam Leavitt, 16th in QBR this year.
That's awesome. Hats off to that staff for setting him up for success and to him for
another freshman
taking a step forward. We've had it's been a while since we felt like we've had a good class of quarterbacks. I think this one's decent. That's going to go to the NFL draft this year, but this freshman class is the truth. There are a lot of guys,
quarterbacks.
There are a lot of dudes that are freshmen all across the country. Van Buren at Mississippi State, Marcel Reed, I think, has a lot of tools
Yeah.
that A&M fans should be excited about. Obviously, Arch
DJ
Manning is
Lagway.
still considered a freshman. There's a lot of fun guys.
I want to say
You're
his
gonna
name
get to
again,
watch
DJ Lagway, huge for Florida.
DJ Lagway, yeah, and he's going to
Yep.
stick around at Florida and be a force. They had a nice win over the rival today. So, Kevin Jennings, I think, is a freshman too at SMU, right?
I think you're right. I'm
Yeah.
have to check it.
Might be a red shirt.
Yeah,
but
maybe a
I
red
think
shirt
he's a
situation. Yeah.
freshman. Yeah, tons of fun guys all around the country. Garrett, let's kind of start to close out the show here, and then I'll let you maybe pick one or two games you want to highlight after this. Let's go down the list and talk about who's locked in to the playoff at this point. Who, regardless of what happens next week, will be in. I think you have Oregon, Penn State, Texas, Indiana, Notre Dame, since they won today over USC. That was a tricky game that they kind of got away with.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the end of the at-large list? Am I missing anybody right now?
I think Ohio State's locked in.
Ohio State is locked in. Yeah, I think that's really the discussion I want to have. I know that's going to be kind of the discussion nationally. Yeah. Did they play their way all the way out? I think they did fall out of hosting range with this loss. I think they're going to be going on the road in the first round.
I would not be surprised by that. Also, just real quick, Kevin Jennings, sophomore, but
gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's SMU, I think, is also probably one of those teams you got to look at as probably locked. I can't imagine 11-2 with your only losses being, I guess, BYU and Clemson if they go on to be the champ. I can't imagine SMU getting left out in that situation. Maybe, but I can't imagine it.
Tennessee's locked in as well. I think 10-2 Tennessee is in. I don't see any reason why they would be jumped next week and fall all the way out from the 8th spot. They're totally safe after their win.
Yeah, I think, look, there's a lot of the picture that's already been set. I think a couple teams played their way out this evening. Yeah, I just don't really know how they're going to handle the rest of it. I think you're going to get to see a lot of the conference champion runner-ups end up making the playoff, and I think that probably makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't really know. I'm going to have to kind of look over the bracket a little bit more this evening and kind of decide what I really think about the field. But there's a lot of teams I think are really safe right now. I think if you've hit 10 wins, or I guess if you have like two losses is probably the threshold for me. So if you're anywhere in that 10-2, 11-1 range, I would say you're probably safe.
Do you think Miami's going to fall out of the rankings that come out on Tuesday?
I think it's going to be real close.
I'm of the opinion that they're going to drop out.
Yeah, it probably really depends. Well, and they punished them real hard for Georgia Tech, so I can't imagine they're going to get less punishment for Syracuse. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think they probably drop. It probably depends on what they think of teams like Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, teams like that. Probably depends on what you think of those teams. It also, I think, really heavily depends on a team like Clemson going out there and winning the ACC to keep, a Miami team out. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Miami's going to drop.
I don't know.
I think Miami's going to drop, and I think people's heads are going to explode when a 3-loss SEC team takes their place. Garrett, I'm going to let you talk about the bracket for a little bit because I think the Mason boys are home, and my dog is going crazy.
There you go. No, get Mitch in here if he wants any maybe final thoughts as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's all good, Austin. You're good. Seeing you pop up in the chat. Yeah, I was going to say could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse both ways. There are a lot of mistakes made on both sides of the field. I think both Texas and A&M made some pretty critical errors that could have made it uglier either direction. So, but yeah, I think ultimately, kind of finishing up on the playoff talk and kind of finishing up the playoff bracket, I think a lot of it's set, which is good. Not a whole lot of movement, despite I do think a team like Miami probably playing their way out. And yeah, I think outside of Miami dropping out, Ohio State probably drops to hosting. I can't really see a situation where Ohio State drops out. And then the good news for a lot of these teams is they're just going to finish 10-2, and they're going to be able to sit themselves at home next week and not suffer another loss.
That is the nice thing. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that might be a little happy that they're avoiding the conference.
I think
championship
Tennessee
game.
has to be first and foremost thrilled that they're 10-2 and don't have to do anything next week.
I think that's great for them. Yeah, absolutely great for them. Let's talk about G5. Let's do a roundup on G5, and then we'll get out of here on that, Garrett. The Americans locked up, but I think they played their way out of a playoff spot this week. Memphis knocked off Tulane on Thursday night. Tulane just couldn't stop anybody on that Memphis side. And I think Army obviously got a nice win over UTSA today. That game's always crazy. I highlighted that on the preview show, but it was, I think, going to be too little too late for anyone out of the American. Going to be a fun game. Tulane and Army next week on Friday night is going to be a really fun game, but I don't think it'll really have any playoff implications on it. Where the playoff implications are going to be on Friday night is going to be in the Mountain West. It will be UNLV and Boise State taking on each other in Boise. So it will be hosted by the Broncos. Boise got a win over Oregon State Friday morning, 34-18. UNLV won tonight against in-state rival Nevada. They won the Fremont Cannon Trophy, 38-14. So Boise State UNLV Part 2. If you remember back when these two teams played each other earlier this season, it was a 29-24 Boise State win in Las Vegas. It was a really fun back and forth game. I'm excited for that one. Do you see that as a winner is in the playoff, or is anyone else in the G5 alive for that last spot?
I think winners in the playoff. The only difference is going to be Boise has the chance to grab the bye. I don't think UNLV can grab the bye if they win.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think UNLV is playing for their spot, but it would be as the 12 seed going on the road to the 5 seed, likely the loser of the SEC championship game, or maybe the loser of the Big Ten championship game. So that's where the Mountain West stands. The other G5 conference championship games that we're going to get next week, Sam Houston knocked off Liberty on Friday. That was a fun back and forth game, 20-18. But Sam Houston was knocked out of Conference USA championship contention by virtue of Western Kentucky knocking off Jacksonville State. Those two teams will run it back in Jacksonville, Alabama next week for the Conference USA championship. The Sun Belt had a really exciting finish down the stretch tonight. Marshall knocked off James Madison 35-33 in double overtime. That clinched Marshall's spot in the Sun Belt championship game. They win the East Division. They'll take on Louisiana, who came back and had to battle back, but knocked off their rival Louisiana Monroe 37-23 on the road tonight. In the MAC, we're going to have an all-Ohio battle between Ohio and Miami. So that's a lot of fun. And did I miss a conference? I don't think I did. I think that's all 5.
I think that's it. I'm sure we missed something somewhere, but yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we can fit into the show tonight. Garrett, we will be back on Tuesday to break down the penultimate. It's right this time. This will be the penultimate.
Trano's big words.
Penultimate college football playoff rankings. We're still a little bit in the air on what the schedule is going to be next weekend. We might not have a live show on Saturday night. We might just punt that to Sunday and have it be kind of a recap of the games and a college football playoff reaction show. Stay locked on our social channels to make sure that you are following along, and you can find what that schedule is when it becomes available. For Mitch Mason, for Garrett Turney, I'm Trey Reeves, and we'll see you guys really soon.
Gracious, how about